Greetings everyone. Steve Tindall of Paracords of Kindness. I'm going to do a tutorial. Somebody asked me about how I made this bracelet, so I figured I'd do this. Now, first and foremost, I'll tell you like I tell everybody, I am not a YouTube creator. I don't have the best equipment, the camera, microphone, and all that. I'm a paracordologist. I know how to make bracelets, not film videos. So, I'll apologize up front for the quality of this video. And if you can hear crickets in the background, I also apologize for that. I seem to have a cricket down here in my shop. And, just makes me feel like I'm outside in the nature. So, if you can bear with me, I'll show you what we're going to do. This is something I've been working on. I've seen people make this, and I don't know exactly how they did it, but I come up with my own method. Now, what we got here is an 8-strand core. I don't know what you call the stitching. I just call it crisscross stitching. It's a trilobite, but it has an accent color behind the stitching. Now, the colors I've used for this is obviously black, and the stitching, micro cord stitching, is burgundy. And the accent color, which is a gutted piece of paracord, is maroon dark, which is, from my understanding, not the same as maroon, because I've looked at them and they're not the same. Maroon is not quite as dark. This is the darkest red that I've been able to find. Right? Now, I'll briefly lay this out. Maybe this will answer many of the questions I've gotten. But the piece of maroon, the accent color that's in the background, it's gutted in order for it to lay flat. Okay? And all I've done, for those, you know how to gut a piece of cord. You just take your paracord, you cut it, and the inner strands, you just pull them out, and then you can kind of flatten it out and use it. But I do it a certain way. I've done this quite enough that I've got my own order of operation, my own technique on how to do this, and it seems to work better. But when I get there, I'll show you. But basically, what it is this. It's 2 pieces of 550, the accent colors, 2 pieces of 550 laid next to each other. And I've ran them through the bracelet so they hang out the back. And I just kind of lay it down, and I stitch over it. But it's also ran through the bottom of the bracelet. And you can see where I've melted it. Let's see. The stitching's melted and singed right here. The accent color is melted and singed right here. And then everything comes to one point. Hopefully. Just depends on how it works out. But most of it all comes to one point. The accent color, the piece of stitching, and the main cord for the bracelet all comes. And it gets melted right there. But I think that'll probably answer the question, because I've had people ask me how I do that accent color. I run it through. I'll tell you this too. I run it through. Like I said, I run it through and it hangs out the back, and it's 2 pieces, and I run both of them through, and I'll have both ends cut, and I won't burn them or singe them or nothing. And while it's in there, I'll hold it on the desk and hold one end of that paracord, and on the other end is where I'll grab those strands, and I'll pull it out. And that way, when I'm holding this end, that'll keep it from being pulled back through. And it'll keep the outer sheath of the cord in place as I pull the strands out. Because I found it's easier to thread it through the bracelet while it's still got the core in it, because it'll go on your fid or your lacing needle. And you get it in there, then then you pull the strands out. Does that make sense? Once you do that, you singe the ends of it, of just the sheath, the outer sheath. You just singe the ends of it, and you leave them, you know, an inch or so in place, and you just do your stitching down. And then when you get completely done, you go back and you snip them and singe them appropriately. But that's the basics. Hopefully that would answer a lot of the questions. But then I'll say this, I don't have one. Let me see. You can't quite tell the difference. This one is an 8-core strand, and this one I did is a 6-core strand. And all when you increase the number of core strands, it just makes for a little bit thicker and wider bracelet. And I've got a customer who likes these things wide. So, you know, the normal Trilobite is a 4-strand core. Well, I moved it up to a 6, and then I've moved it up to an 8. And I know these buckles that I use, very limited in the size of a metal buckle. So the space, the gap in there that you're trying to run your cords through, you're limited. And me, if you look at that, I like to have that gap completely filled and the strands laying all flat going through there. All flat. I don't want them overlapping and bunched up, and I don't want them loose so the buckle will slide back and forth. Clean, neat, and tight. Makes sense? But in order to get an 8-strand core on here, I had to come up with my own method of it, and I'll show you how I do this. Now, it doesn't make, to be honest, it doesn't make for the top of the bracelet is not that pretty, but the rest of it looks fine, and the end of it looks good. But just that top part, which I might be able to change that up a little bit, but it works because the accent strands have to go through there, and this seems to work pretty good. But I'll show you. I've seen a lot of videos where they'll do the core strands and they'll do a bunch of cow hitches and all that kind of stuff. And it makes it, to be honest, it makes it hard to size your bracelet once you get on jig. Once you get all them cords running back and forth and you're trying to size that thing and you got all these cow hitches in here, it's hard to adjust them and then check the sizing on the jig to basically get the whole setup good to go before you can actually start weaving. And if any of you ever done one of these 6, 8, even higher, some core strand, core bracelets that have all them strands in there, and you got cow hitches, it makes it hard to adjust it and get that thing just right. Well, the method I use, I've had people tell me, yeah, you might not want to use that. I hadn't figured out why yet, because what I'm doing, it works pretty good. And I'll show you that too. But let's just do this. Most of you know how to do a Trilobite, so I'm not really going to go into all that. I just figured I'd explain that, and once I get, I'll do a little bit of this Trilobite just to show, because, this is an 8-core strand, and the standard Trilobite's on a 4-core strand, so it's slightly different in the way I do this, because I'll just show you when I get there. But I'm gonna like anything, when I do these little videos, I may talk a lot, but I try to explain things that, no offense, and I'm not pointing my fingers at anybody, but some of these YouTube videos, they don't give a lot of information. They just throw out there and they show you over, under, and they leave it at that, right? What we're going to be doing today, I'm going to be making this for a friend of mine. Now, he's He's a big and tall man. He's a stout guy, so he has a rather large wrist. So this bracelet is going to be quite long. He has a 9.5-inch wrist. So to add to the size, you take that 9.5 inches and you got to add to that when you put it on the jig. That way it'll fit around his wrist. The add to for this 8-strand core is about 1.25 inches. Just to be safe, 1.125 inches to 1.25 inches. Right? So I'll go ahead and show you how I do this. This is what I do in my Frankenstein jig, my rig jig. This is version 4.0. It's been modified quite a few times, but it works and it didn't cost me $50, $60, $70. But normally what I'll do, I know you can't see the whole thing in the frame, but you'll be able to see enough of it to understand what I'm going to show. Normally what I will do is I'll go ahead and just get me a piece of spare cord and I'll run it through the thing and I'll pull it tight and just hold it with my fingers. That way I can get an initial measurement between the buckles and have it just smaller than what I want it to actually be. That way, once I get it all set up, it's already good to go, and then I can just cinch it down and it tightens everything up. So like I said, 9.5-inch wrist, and the add to is about 1.25 inches for this bracelet. Now, normal Trilobite's not quite that much. It's not as much because you don't have as many core strands. But see, I'll measure this out. And right now, I've got it on, it's 10.5 inches. So there's 1 inch right there. Now, we're going to have to get another 1/4 inch to this, but I'll show you. Okay, but now that we got the initial setup, we'll take this out. Now my cord, I've measured out. Oh, I'll throw this out there too. I tell people this all the time. Take notes. Take notes. Make notes. Note cards. Recipe cards, so to speak. And I got a little box over there. But I'll write down what kind of cord I'm using, what style of bracelet. This is a Trilobite. And I usually, first time I ever make a bracelet, I'll make it to fit myself. Or I'll attempt to make it to fit myself. But what I'll do is I'll write down what I've measured it out and how much cord I've used. That way when I get finished, I can try to put it on my wrist, and I have a sizing manual. So after I make it, I see if it fits, and I can measure on this sizing thing on the manual to see whatever. And then you can calculate between what I started with and what I need it to be, and I can figure out that add to. That's the most important thing. These YouTube videos, like I said, no offense to anybody, but they'll say, I'm making a 7-inch bracelet and I'm going to use 15 feet of cord. But they don't give you the add to measurement. And that's the key factor. That's what you need. But I'll write down how much cord that I've used. And I'll say this too. Anytime I watch one of these tutorial videos and they give you a cord length, I always add a foot or two to that, because I'm sure many of you have experienced it. You get down to weaving the bracelet and you get down to the end and you realize you don't have enough cord. And it's like all that work was wasted. I'd rather have too much cord and have to cut a foot or two off the end than not have enough and go back and redo it. And that's like for the initial time first time you make the bracelet, you do that. And you make note of it. And then when you get done, you look at how much X spare you have. And you can change your measurements accordingly. Makes sense. You do all that the first time you make a bracelet. You get the measurements, the add to number, all the specs, and everything you need, and you write them down. That way when you go to remake it, you just have to do a little math, and it's not hard. But, let's see. Set up an 8 strand core. Now, like I said, we're making what? The total from buckle to buckle, from tip to tip, as I call it, it's going to be about 10 3/4 inches. Now, I've figured out, I ain't never made one quite this big. I usually do about 4. The largest one of these I've made is for a 7 3/4 inch wrist. And I use about 18.5 feet of cord. So, considering we're going to add about an inch or 2 to this, give or take, I just went ahead and cut me 20 feet of cord. Now, to set up this 8 strand core, we find the middle point, which I have no idea where it is, but we're going to hopefully get that knot out. Is there a knot in there? Okay, there we go. Yeah, this is a total mess. That's alright though. Let me do this off camera real quick. It's a lot easier. I got more room. I'm not going to bump the camera. Give me just a second. We all know how to find the middle of this. You run it through like that. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one cow hitch on the top of the top buckle, the starting buckle, if you will. Now this is the way I do it. I'm going to stick it in from the top. And I'll say this too, I normally don't work with it flat on my desk. I've got it up here so the camera can see it. I've normally got this jig, the bottom end sitting between my legs and my lap, and it propped on the corner of my desk so it's angled like a drafting table, if you will. That way it's facing me and I see it. So this is kind of, you know, not my normal setup. So be patient with me if it looks like I'm fumbling through this. It's just because I don't normally do them this way. Okay, so we got us a cow hitch at the top. Tighten it up. You don't have to do it real tight because we're going to have to get some more cords through there. And now you just run it down. I'm going to do the left side first. The left side first. Now I'll say this. Here's a trick. If this, maybe this will apply to you, maybe it won't. But I got a big, huge desk. And there's a drawer on either side of the knee hole up under the desk. What I will do to keep my cord, because I'm in a shop and it's got dusty, dirty floor. To keep this cord from hitting that floor, I open up both bottom drawers on either side of me. That way when I'm doing it, I just throw the cord off and it falls in this drawer as opposed to on the dirty, dusty ground. That's just something I picked up from doing this. Okay, so we take the left cord, go through the top of the buckle, pull it through. Obviously, when you do this, make sure you get all your twists out. Okay, then we're going to go up. And this is the trick. Now, we're going to take this. We're going to take this here. Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see what I'm actually talking about right here. Because this this is the part that makes this a little bit easier. See, this is the only cow hitch I'm going to have in this setup, is this one. That way I don't have one here and one here, or, you know, one up at the top or two at the top, two at the bottom, and you're constantly having to adjust them to get that size right. That's one reason I try to get the measurement for the bracelet set. Then I come in and put this core strand in there. It makes it a little easier. You don't have so much adjusting to do. But undo this cow hitch just a little bit and run this through the cow hitch. And we see that. I know I'm using black cord, and I apologize, but that's the color this bracelet is going to be. And you just pull it through. We see that. Now I have gotten this thing. Yeah. And we're going to come back down. Right? We see how I did this, right? You've got your basic cow hitch, and I've run this through the loop. And we're going to do the other side the same way. But the rest of this setup is like anything else. Come back down, run it through the top, pull your slack out. Now, this is our final pass on the left side. We go back through the top of the buckle, and we'll pull the slack out. Alright, okay, now for the other side, we're going to do the same thing, we're just going to do it on the other side. I'm going to do this one rather quickly as opposed to explaining it. Obviously we're going to the right, so we're going to go to the right of the two strands I was in it. Give me just a second. There's a piece of yeah. See if I can go through there. Is it too fat from where I cut and burned it? Yeah, it's not wanting to. Give me a second. I'll throw this out there while I'm doing this. When I go to make one of these, it's got a little teat on the end, obviously. But when I go to make one of these bracelets, I run my fingers and see if there's any place where it feels like it's going to snag when I'm pulling it through the core strands. Because if there is, it could possibly snag. So I'll always smooth it out before I actually start weaving. That way there's no way this hard melted piece is going to snag on the core strands. But this one is a little bit fat to get through there. We can kind of smooth that out just a little bit. So now it goes through there a little bit easier. Okay, but we're going to run it through there. Alright, now, again, we're going to go through this cow hitch. We're going to go up through the cow hitch. Pull everything off to the side so you can see this. So here's the edge of our cow hitch. We're going to go up through the cow hitch. We're going to pull the slack out. Now we're going to go through the top of the bottom buckle once again. Slide this back up. We're going to go through the top of the buckle. And I got all these contraptions down here, wing nuts and bolts and screws, so I'm always mindful not to get it snagged and potentially snag my cord. Okay. Now, if I pull it too tight, it's going to distort this cow hitch. You see what I'm saying? Which is an issue. So you got to be mindful of that. Okay, now we go back through the top, and this will be the final pass. Pull it off to the side. Okay. Okay, now we got it all set up. Now this is the key part right here. We'll try to take out the slide manually. Now this cow hitch, if you can see this is where the trick comes in. See how this cow hitch has done stretched itself down? So what we're going to have to do is find those two first strands that are part of that cow hitch, and we're going to pull it. That way we can tighten that cow hitch up. Take it, kind of pull them to the side. That's what I always do. I kind of pull them to the side and use my thumb to push up the hitch part itself. Kind of get that tight. And then on that back side, grab those two cords like that and keep some tension on them while you're doing this. Okay. That way, when you go to tighten up the part that's running through the cow hitch, I know this is hard to see and I apologize, but hopefully I can explain what I'm doing. But keep this tight. Those two first initial strands that you started with, keep those tight. And you want them on either side here. Let's pull this out of the way and you can kind of hopefully see what I'm doing here. See what I'm saying? This is running through the hitch and this side over here is running through the hitch. So you keep these tight and you just follow them down to the other two. Where they go through. You see what I'm saying right here? So you got this pulled this way and you grab the other ones on the bottom and you pull them up. And that will keep tension on this whole part. And you just work your way through. Okay? Now, the thing is, we still got to keep this cow hitch from getting extended. So we take this piece and we pull it up, straight up, so we don't get that cow hitch out of place. And we pull those up. And I'll usually grab those initial strands again, all together. Now, you go down to the bottom, if you can see this. So this is the loose piece, and we grab the other end of it, and we pull it. And then, like I said, this is the last piece. I don't pull it too tight. And I alternate this as I do this. Okay. And when we get to the end, we still got all this stuff kind of held with our hand tight. What we do is we take this piece. This is how I lock it into place so it doesn't move. I'll take this piece, your left weaving strand, and go over that core strand and through this loop you have created. Many of y'all have seen this. Many of y'all probably do this. But for those who don't, and you basically end up with just one little knot there. And again, you grab the bottom and it pulls. It'll pull this tight, but you grab it on the bottom and you pull it through. and you reach up here and you pinch it to keep it. And then you take this and you work that knot up with your thumb all the way to the top. And you kind of tighten it up. Alright, okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We got to get this tight. We've already got all the hand tied on all these. We're going to take this. We're going to go over the top, and then we're going to run it through this loop right here. And we're going to pull all that slack out. Okay. And again, we're going to grab it on the bottom, where it's coming through the bottom of the buckle. And we're going to pull that tight. Now when we do this, we want to keep all these strings running through this buckle, kind of. We want them to lay flat and not be overlapped. We want neat, clean, and tight. Okay, now we're going to pull this, we're going to pull this bottom part again, and we're going to hold it here. And then we're going to just tighten this up. Run that knot all the way up. As you're tightening it. Tightening it with your finger, with your hand. I'm rolling that knot to get the slack out. Now that you got it pretty tight, you can do it with both. Roll that knot towards itself, and that'll take the slack out. Makes sense? Now it's pretty tight, and you can weave it from right there. But we got to get that extra 1/4 inch in there, which we can usually do. So let me back out. Alright? And the way I got my jig set up, I know you can't see all this, but I'll show you. All I have to do, I'll take these strands and get them out of the way. And I can just flip it on the side. And this end, the end of this piece that's sticking out the bottom, I put it on my chest and use it. And I'll hold this and this wing nut. Wing nut, and there's the bolts on the other end. I just use a screwdriver. And I put it on my chest. I know you can't see this, but I've got this piece right here, and I'm about to push it again, push it toward me, toward my chest, and hold it in place. And I'll loosen this up. Now, propping it against my chest, I'm going to reach up here and I'm going to pull this thing. And I pulled one of these things so tight before that I broke a plastic buckle. And tighten it down pretty good and reach over here and hold that wing nut and cinch that screw down. Now these things are tight. And since I pulled on it, we're going to get that little bit of extra length in here. But always, I'll say this too. I know these professionally made jigs, they have measurements down here. Yeah, don't use those. Don't use those. I always check. Always check. What's the rule? Measure twice and cut once. Because we all know, if you get this part right here wrong, you're going to go through all this work. You're going to have a bracelet that will, it's either going to be too big or too short. So we're going to come over here. Okay. Now, like I said, the add tool on this is about 1.25 inches. Just because it's an 8-string cord, it's a little bit thicker. So, what we're sitting at right now is about 10 5/8. So let's see if we can't get just a little bit more out of that. Yeah, I felt it slip just there, I think. Yeah, it slipped. Let me try that one more time. Because this is kind of hard to do. Because it's got so much tension on it. When I loosen this screw up to get a little bit more out of it, it tends to want to slip and creep back up. So I got to do this all while I'm holding it. See, it slipped again. It does it every time. Give me a second. Okay. Now, that thing's as tight as I can get it. Bet you I could play Leonard Skinner's Stairway to Heaven on there. Okay. I know. It's taking a while. But we all know this. Oh yeah, that's good right there. As long as it doesn't slip. We're sitting at almost 10 3/4. Almost. About 10 5/8, 10. It's almost, that'll work though. Because once I make it, I'll put it on this thing and I'll slide it down to C, and then I'll force, and it'll stretch it out. I'll let it sit on this for a little while. But that's that. Now, for the actual stitch or weaving part, it's not that hard. But since we've got 8 strands, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. Most of you already know how to do a trilobite. It's just you got so many strands. You're like, well, which ones do I do overs and unders with? What I'll do is I'll take these 2, because you'll have 2 right here that are running on the top. And then you got 4 that are in the middle that are, now you can do this however you want to do this. It doesn't really matter which ones, but I'll take these 2 that are on the top. Obviously, they go to the sides. And then the other ones, what I usually do, so you see how I got 3 on this side, 2 in the middle, 3 on this side, for a total of 8. Well, 3 on either side, that's going to be the edges, and the 2 in the middle. We see that? So what we're going to do on this one, it's going to take those 3 and we're going to go down through there. Now, this can be tricky because you got so many. And on the other side, you're going to come up. So basically, you're going over 3, under 2, and over 3, and you're going to pull your cord through. And after you do a couple of passes through here, it'll flatten itself out, and it'll be a little bit easier. Everybody knows, but this cord, you're going to go underneath 3. The same 3, underneath 3, over 2, and then under 3. Like I say, it doesn't really matter which, because you're going to have 4 that are right in the middle. 2 on top, 2 on the bottom, but they're right in the middle. You just have to take 2 of those and make them part of the outer part. Does that make sense? Now this right here can be tricky. Make sure you don't have your cords twisted. And push it up. Now the thing is, because we all know the beginning of a bracelet, Never looks great. Now, being that this is the first one, you push it up, and this piece right here never wants to do right. But it's not really much you can do. That's the ugly part of the top of the bracelet I was talking about. It just doesn't never looks right. But you push it up. Now I'm going to say, don't push it up too much, because when we come back and we run in that accent color and the stitching, we don't want it so tight that we can't get our lacing needle, our fid through there. Does that make sense? Now we'll just do it again. We'll bring this piece over 3, under 2, and then over 3 again. Like I said, I'll pull it through. I'll pull it through, and all the slack I just drop next to me in the drawer that I've got open. Now this one, this side, we go under 3 and over the 2, and you make the X in the middle. If you don't know how to make a basic trilobite, watch a video for that. And but that's all this is. That's all this is. Like I said, I'll pull this through and I'll drop it in that drawer. Now, again, remember, we're going to stitch and all that stuff, so we don't want to make this thing as tight as we can. But just kind of push it up, pull it, and these first couple ones are not going to look pretty because these core strands are still haven't fallen into place yet. But you just push it up, take your slack out. Don't try to wrench down on it too much. It'll work itself out eventually after we do a couple of passes. But we want, most of the slack out of there. We just push it up. Now we'll do it again. Pull it through, drop it in my drawer. Now this one we're going to go under 3, over 2. Make sure we're making the X in the middle. And we're going to go under 3. And we'll pull the slack through. That's all there is to this. Alright, we push it up. And we pull. Here, let's zoom in just a little bit. Alright, see now it's starting to look like a trilobite. But like I said, this top part, it's not the prettiest setup. I'm sure if anybody's got a better suggestion on how to do that, please let me know. But the thing is, like I've said, why is that got... Okay, that's not right. That's got a whole bunch of slack right there. We don't want that, so we got to get that out. We're going to pull that up. Before we get too far into it, always check all that stuff. That way you can get all your slack out. Oh, and for anybody who doesn't know, these are basic like jeweler pliers. They're conical shaped on the ends. They don't have a sharp point. They're blunted, and most importantly, they don't have any teeth or grooves on them. Therefore, when you grab that cord, if you accidentally slip off, you're less likely to snag your cord with these things. I use these things more than anything. Any tool in my tool belt, I use this more than anything else. Okay, now we got all that slack figured out. Just push it up a little bit. Now, like I said, we're not wrenching down on this. We're just pulling the slack out, using your thumbs and your fingers to kind of roll those knots to get the slack out. And see how it's starting to separate the 3 on the outer and that's 2 inner. Right? And you just push it up and you just do it again. That's all there is to this. And then you just, obviously you get to the end, which I'm not going to film this whole thing, but I'll come back once I get done and I'll show you how I do the actual core. push it up. Not too much. Not too much. That was something I had to learn the hard way. They don't tell you on these YouTube videos. When you go to do this and you know you're going to have to stitch, you don't want this thing so tight that you can't get that. You want it loose enough that when you go to stitch it, you're not forcing that thing through there. So you push it up, kind of pull the slack out on either side. Use your fingers, like I said, to roll those knots, and then your hands to tighten it. Once you get going pretty good, and I'll say this too, a tip, especially on these trilobites, because they're noticeable. Have you ever seen a picture of one, perhaps yours? I know when I first started this, and still to this day, they're not pretty. If you don't get this tension, not that it has to be a lot, it's not how much you're tensioning, it's the consistency with each pass. You want the tension consistent. Why? Because you want these two little pieces on the side. You want every one of them to be. You don't want that thing to look like a heart monitor. Boop, 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 boop. You want them the same. And as you do it, look at it. And you can see, if you see one that looks wrong, fix it before you get way down here, because you can't fix it then. You pull it, push it up first, and then use your fingers and roll it. That's all there is to it. Over 3, under 2, over 3. Pull it all the way through, and I'm going to drop it in that drawer right there. Under 3, making the X over 2, and under 3. And pull it. Drop it in the drawer. Push it up first. Just kind of work it out with your hands like that. Push it up again. And then just kind of use your fingers to roll it while you're pulling it. That's all there is to it. And like I say, make sure you're consistent tension. That way, they're all consistent down the edges. And they're not boop, 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 you know. And that's all there is to that. You just work your way all the way down to the end. And I'll come back when I get down to the end and I'll show you that part. Okay, we got down to the end. We finished the whole bracelet. And like I said, this is measured out at 10 and approximately 5/8 inches, 10 3/4. And that's for a 9.5 inch wrist. And I said that I cut 20 feet of cord. And I've still got one more little section to do. And that's how much cord I have. So if you're going to make one this big, I suggest adding, 8 inches more. Just so you'll have enough room. And here's another suggestion. I know when I bought vids and a knotter's tool and all that, I bought a set and it kind of come with the basics. But I have since went back and invested in extra type 3 vids because it makes it so much easier. Especially when you're doing one of these advanced bracelets that has multiple cords. It's so much easier to have a vid for every single cord than to have to put the vid on one cord, weave it through. Take it off, put the vid on another cord, weave it through. If you got a vid for every cord, it makes it so much easier. And if you plan on doing this in an attempt to sell them and produce them, it's all about productivity, efficiency. What helps you produce the bracelets faster, right? So you can invest in more vids. You can go to any of the various paracord sites, or you can just go on Amazon and buy a set of 5 for $10 US. They've paid for themselves, believe me. But I've got down to the end, and my cord is not quite long enough to wrap that fid back around. So I'm going to have to use hemostats, which I hate doing, but it can be done. So what we're going to do, let me zoom in and let you see this. And this is how I try to end these bracelets. Oop, wrong direction. Sorry about that. This is how I try to end these bracelets. Let me make just a little bit more room right here at the end. That way, it looks like the ending doesn't look as bad as the beginning of it. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap them one more time. Hopefully we can do this. Now, I'm going to take this. What I'm going to end up doing is wrapping this one around one more time, coming up, and then going across the middle and going down. And this one is going to go down through there. So they're both going to be going down through the same spots. Pardon me. That way they'll both be going down through there and they'll be coming out at the same spot right together. That when you go to snip and cinch them, they're right there together. And it keeps the finish neat, clean, and tight. Always remember, neat, clean, and tight. Anything you can do to make it neat, clean, and tight. Now, this is going to be difficult. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take it off the jig. Let me back out the camera. I'm going to take this off the jig. And I'll do this, too, while I'm at it. I'm going to take this off the jig. We're going to get the jig out of the way. We're done with that. Now, this sizing, man, doesn't help you size it, but it helps you make sure you got the right size. But the thing is, this sizing manual doesn't actually big enough. It should go. Oh yeah, that'll fit. Even though this thing only goes up to about a 9 1/4 inches, which his wrist is 9 1/2, it slides right off the end. So we're gonna safely assume that that's gonna be a good to go size. Now I said earlier, you make a bracelet. This was meant to be a 7 1/4 inch bracelet. Well, when you make it, you always just take it. Now see, it fits, but I'll take it now. Push it down on there a little bit more, and just let it sit, and it'll stretch it out just a little bit. Get this out of the way. That's a big one, man. Whew. Okay, so let's see if we can't do this. This one's going to go underneath, so we're going to take these hemostats. Hopefully I can get this to work. Not accustomed to using these hemostats to do what I'm about to do. I normally, my cord's long enough and I can just sorry, get that out of the way. That's my light, so I can see. I apologize for that. So I ran them hemostats through there. Now I'm going to just take it and I'm going to bite down on it. And I'm going to pull it through. And this, what I said in the beginning, where before you start weaving, make sure your burnt tips of your cord are smooth. That way they're not going to snag on anything. This is where it comes in to play more so than weaving your bracelet. I said this is not going to be the easiest thing. Let's try this one more time. Grab a hold of it a different way. Yeah, see, it come right through that time. Okay, now we got to get these two through this hole. So we're going to come up through here, wrap this around, pull it through. Now we're going to do the same way with the other cord. I'll do all this. Yeah, this is going to work. We got it. Forsake, or actually hemostats. like a surgeon. Okay. Oh yeah, these, I purchased these off of Amazon. They came in a set. These are curved. I got another one that they're straight. They were relatively cheap, and they've worked pretty good. So think about it. I'll put the link in the description of the video for the various things. The pliers, the extra, it's 5 fids like this, type 3 fids. Okay, but now we got all that through there. I'm gonna kind of tighten this up a little bit. And normally when I do this, I'll have enough hanging off, but it can tend to get in the way and be bothersome when you go to stitch. So what I normally do is go ahead and cut them off. That way there's not much hanging, and it's not in the way when you go to stitch, and you're not getting tangled around it and things like that. And then when you finally get done, you snip and cinch everything at once. Or not necessarily everything at once, but you do them all together. Sometimes you can do them all at once. Sometimes, but we're going to make sure we got it tight. Yeah, that looks good. We'll hold this up here so everybody can see it. It's probably got some dust and lint on it, which, it is black, so that stuff does show up. But see how the top of it, there's got to be, it's not that bad. It's just because there's so many cords and it's so tight, and I'm trying to get 8 strands. Like I said, I'm trying to get 4 strands to go through that slot and to lay flat. But yet I'm using an 8-strand core. But it looks pretty good for right now. Big piece of dust right there. But that's it on that. Okay, so now for the stitching part. Oh, not the stitching. This is the part. I have to cut the cord. I didn't even do that. But what I'll do, considering this one is a lot longer than normal, let's measure this out again. Because you're going to have 2 pieces of 550 cord, and they're basically going to run right down this middle section. And like I say, I'm going to stick them through at the top so they're hanging out the back. And I'm going to just lay down here, and they're going to follow this down, and then I'm going to stick them through, and they'll hang out the back, kind of right in the same area that these two are hanging out, right? But normally I cut me a piece, I know how long, but this, because this one's a lot longer, like the one I made for myself yesterday, you see the size difference? Oh yeah. See, I made this one for myself, and I have a 7-inch wrist, and this thing is snug. I had to stretch it a little bit to get it to fit, but that's the way I like them. I like them. If you can see, it leaves marks on my arm. I want it snug. So this one I've made, even though it's 2 different kinds of buckles, is relatively the same. It's about a 3-inch difference there. So from 7-inch to a 9.5-inch, got 3 inches in there. Oh yeah, that'll fit. And the gentleman I'm going to make it for, it'll fit nicely. It won't be too big. Okay, but let's see. Normally I just cut those 2 pieces of accent color, but because we got this bracelet is a lot longer than normal, let's see, we got 9 inches. So we're going to need approximately a foot. So I need 2 feet, and we'll add 4 inches to that. Like I say, always. So you don't have this problem. You see what I'm saying? But I'll add, so we'll 24 inches, which is 2 feet, and we'll add 4 inches. We'll just make it a 30 inches for this accent piece. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to be using royal blue. Give me just a second, I'm going to cut it. It's right over here. Won't take but just a second to cut this. Okay, I'm back. I ended up not using royal blue because what I'm going to do, the stitching I'm going to use is this colonial blue. So I want to contrast, and this is always my thought, I want to contrast between the color of the bracelet and these two, the accent piece and the stitching. But most importantly, you want to contrast between the stitching and the accent piece. That way you can see that it's not just one big color bled together. And you can see the detail handiwork, the craftsmanship of it, if that, hopefully that makes sense. But, and when I cut it off the spool that I have it on, I leave one end like this because we're going to gut it. But the other end is where we'll start. We'll take our fid, and hopefully this will go on here. Yeah, feels like that's going to go on there and I won't have to do anything extra. We'll get it on there. I always tug on it to make sure it's not going to come out. If it comes out, I burn the end of it again. I want it to be in there and it's not going to come out. Yeah, I'm putting some, it's not coming out. Okay, now this, let's see if I can show you how I do this. Let's zoom in just a little bit. Okay, so like I said, we're going to come out and we're basically going to have two pieces that are going to be laid side by side right here in this middle section. And then the stitching is going to hold it down and draw them close together. I mean, when you look at it, you can tell there's two pieces behind it, but from a distance, I mean, granted, it's kind of hard to see this one because, you know, but you don't quite can see, you can't quite tell that it's two separate pieces back there. But, you know, when you get up close, you can tell. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to start from the back, and we're going to thread it through, and then we're going to run it down the front and push it back through the back, okay? Now I'll leave that piece. It's one piece. And if we look from the way this is started, okay, this is the top where I started weaving, the front. This side, the strand that was on this side, it goes underneath and around the back, right? And that's the piece we're going to go up under. That's what I normally do. So you're going to come in at an angle right here and go up under that piece. You can see it right here. I ended up not doing it that way on this one. Is that the right? No, that's the wrong side. Yeah. You can see I go up this piece going across. I go up under there and then I thread it through the bracelet so it comes out right here at the top. Now granted, they're not completely together at the top, but once you start stitching it, that stitching will draw those two cords together. But I'll show you how to do this. I go through there and I'll pull it through. Then, and this is tricky, because what I'll do, remember, we have that cow hitch at the top, which is this piece right here. I want to go underneath that and over here. So in this little crack right here is where I want to come out on either side, hopefully. You know, be careful. And I'll say this too. Whenever you get a new set of fids, whether they're the expensive ones that cost way overpriced from the paracord sites, or you just get them off of Amazon, take you some fine grit sandpaper and just sand the back end of them, get any burrs off, and the same thing with the front. Just kind of put it at an angle and spin it in your fingers and sand it off. That way you don't have any burrs on there, right? And that would potentially keep you from snagging. Okay, now we got to make sure. I'm not used to doing this on camera, so I've normally got this. Let's see, where am I going to go through at to get it to come out? And the lighting, let's say, I don't normally do this on camera. I'm a paracordologist. You like that word? Big fancy word. I'm not a YouTube maker. I know how to do this, but I'm trying to do this on camera. My lighting's not right and everything, so it's hard for me to see exactly where I want it to go through. And sometimes, here's your helpful hint. Where you want it to come out, sometimes take your fid from that side and kind of run it through there, and then you open up that space just a little bit. Then you can look through and you can see, you say, okay, you come in from the back side. See how I did that? Now we're going to pull this through. We're going to get the twists out. And then we're going to pull it through until. Now I know you're thinking, well, it's hanging off on the edge and you're going to have big snips. Once you take, it's hanging off onto the edge. And you don't want to lay in here where it's going to be snipped and singed in the end. But remember, we're going to gut it. Sorry. We're going to gut it. So this is going to be real thin, and it'll slide right over there into where we want it. That way it won't be sticking out on the side to be seen. You want all neat, clean, and tight, but you know, the snip and the singe, it's got to be done. But we don't want it, preferably if you can do it so it can't be seen on the front or on the sides. You want it to be put in the back where it's going to be less visible. Does that make sense? But I'll leave out, sorry, I keep getting off camera, I'm sorry. But we get it about that much, about an inch, inch and a half. And then we're going to just take this piece and we're going to run it down. Just run it down. And when you get down here to where, whatever, you just hold it. I always hold it. And then we're going to get through this side. And we're going to do it. Just between, not past this last middle section, but between the second to the last one, that's where I normally do it. Because I like to keep my snip and singe from being right next to that buckle. Because I've learned, if it's right next to that buckle, when that thing starts moving, it can crack and come loose. And you're trying to keep, it can crack and come loose. So we're going to make sure you don't poke your cord. So that's what I always do. I know you can't see it, but you can hold that up, and I can look through there, and I can see that hole where I want it to go. I can see through to the other side. That's one reason I have this light. But I can see through that. I can see through that bracelet, that hole where I want it to go, and I can kind of line it up. Boop, it comes right through the back, and then you pull it down. So I did that. Now, for the other one, what I've been doing is taking that same piece and now doing it in reverse and coming up through. This can be tricky. It's going to go through. This is going to be one of them instances where we're going to stick it through this side to kind of create a hole of where we might want it to be. Yeah, there we go. I can see it. I can come through the back, and it goes right through. Okay, now right here, don't pull it all the way, because we're going to eventually, I'm going to cut this piece right here. So I want it to hang out a little bit, just like up here. On this end, we want it hanging off, but we're going to cut it right halfway. So don't pull it all the way through. Leave you a little hanging out there. But now, we're just going to run back down the other side. I'm going to run it through on the other side of those two middle core strands that we were woven around. But just below that cow hitch piece and the first crossover of the two center strands. Now this one potentially can get stuck. I can see it coming through there. And I know sometimes you got a tight bracelet. I know I hear people talking about jamming this through and all that. Get it through when you can see the tip, put it down on your desktop, just go like that. It'll go through. Okay, now make sure we don't have any twists in our cord. See the concept I'm working with? Now I haven't gutted them yet. Alright, make sure your little loop is sticking out on this side. And there you go. Now, I'm going to take this off. What I'll do, here's the fun part. Let me back out. You don't need to be up close to see this. You'll be able to see this a little bit better. This is a part I think everybody wants to know. Well, see how I did that? Alright, now, this is the bottom of the bracelet. I see how they want to separate. They're going to be, right there at the end, they're going to separate. There's nothing you can do about it. Unless you put them in the same side, which I don't do it that way. But as you stitch it, it'll draw those two pieces together. And they'll lay flat. And they'll take up that space. Now, granted, while you're doing it, you may have to kind of adjust it as you go. But for the most part, it'll lay in there just like you want it to. That's why I do. It's 8 strands. You got 3 on one side, 3 on one side, and 2 in the middle. That keeps this middle section the right size and relative to what I'm doing here. Because if I had, let's just, for example, say I had 1 strand on the side and 1 strand on this side, and then 6 running down the middle, that middle section would be real wide, and these little things wouldn't want to sit right. But if you keep 2 center strands in your core, and everything else on the side, these 2 accent colors will lay right there in the middle. I know, it looks like, you're like, man, there's way more room. Once you do the stitching, and you gut them, they lay flat, and they take up that space perfectly. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to come up here. We got this one. We're going to cut this one too, about 1 inch long. Just cut it. And if you can afford them, invest in some actual cloth shears. They cut through this paracord like butter, as opposed to $12 whatevers. Okay, bam, you got that. Now you come back on this end. We're just going to cut this in half also. Okay, now what we do, like I say, this is where we do the gutting. I'll take this, I always do this. When I cut a piece, that way it can be saved. It goes right there on my desk. Okay, so what we do now, we come over here, and I usually pull from this bottom end. So we're going to take this, we're going to take our pliers, your fingers, or whatever. We're going to grab a hold of those core strands. And you're going to hold this one up here that it's going to come out of. One of them. Which one is it? Yeah, it's this side right here. See how it pulled it in up here? And once you get them out and you can get a hold of them, you just pull them all out. Now you can save these and do whatever you want with them. I don't have a purpose for these. I don't have any need for them, so they go in the trash can right next to them. We see I did that. Now, before you do anything else, all this frayed mess you got here, we don't want it to get a run in your cord. We're going to cut and snip and singe this off, but for right now, we don't want it to get run or snagged or pull and have a run. The ladies out there who make paracord, you know, a run in your pantyhose? Yes. Many of you know what I'm talking about. When I do it, I always flatten it out. Same thing with the other end, the one you just gutted. That's all you got to do. Now, we're going to do the other side. This side. Now, if you watch, I know you can't see it very well. You see that white? When I pull on it down here on this bottom, you're going to see that white disappear. If you can see, if I can keep it in frame for you. But you got to be careful when you do this. Soup, it just sucked it up. See how? And then you just grab a hold of it and pull it out. Discard it out of the way. Singe the end of that one. Flatten it out. And do the other one the same way. Oop, that one didn't get done very well. Bam, bam, bam. There you go. Oop, I got some nasties on that. Okay. Yeah, and don't think I'm not immune to that hot paracord. I've just gotten used to it. Okay, now we see how that is. That's all there is to it. Now we're going to cut us up one piece. I use one big long piece to stitch, and I start up top on one side. And I'll show you how I do this. Go back and forth. And most of you probably already know this stitching pattern. But that's the pattern. I don't know what it's called. I'm sure it's got a name. I just call it the crisscross because that's what it is. It crosses from one side to the other to the other. And just work your way all the way down. Okay, now, normally I cut me a piece 6.5, 7 feet. Why? Because I don't want to run out. So on this one, whew, because we've got all this extra space and it's a long bracelet, I think I'm going to just cut it. Let's see. I think I'll cut. I think I'll cut just an 8-foot piece. Now that's probably going to be way more than I need. Just in case. Let me put my vids up. Because these things have a tendency to roll up under stuff, roll off the desk. Don't want them dropping on the ground because then you ding the points up. And you have to go back and sand them down and smooth them out again. And don't ask me what this is for. Somebody probably knows. It's just like a, I don't know if it's real leather or not. It appears to be real leather. But these vids fit down in there. And that's what I have repurposed it for this. And I've got a simple plastic container that I keep them all in. I've already got this one out for my micro cord. Get that out of the way. Now, and I'll show you this. Something I made. It's good for me because I do all my work here. I have computer screens right in front of me, a keyboard right there. My tower is right over here. But I do all my work. This is my work area. But I've made this. I'll show you. It's to hold my micro spool, my micro cord. Actually this is a broomstick. I kind of sanded it, rounded it off, and drove a screw down to the bottom into each one of them. I made this. Now granted, if you looked at it without the spools, these are not perfectly straight up and down. They're all bent every which way. But that's my holder. It'll hold, what, 27 spools of micro cord. And I've got them all labeled. Yeah, most of the time they come with a sticker. I'll move it and put it on the edge. But like some of them, where I didn't have the sticker or the sticker got destroyed, I just write on there what it is. That way I'll know. Because, you know, sometimes you get 7 different varieties of red and you can't remember which one is which. And I like to I like to know what colors I'm using. Okay, so there's that. So we're going to find our colonial blue. I keep a rubber band on there. Most of you know this, but keep a rubber band on there. That way the working end, standing end, whatever you call it, the loose end doesn't come unraveled. And, you know, you're constantly having it come unwound. But when I cut this stuff, lighter ready, scissors ready. I'll just hold it up here on my desk with a little 12-inch ruler. Grab the end of it. It's not an exact science. I said 8 feet. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. And 8. And we'll throw in 4 inches just to be on the safe side. Like I said, I'll always cut more than I think I'm going to need. Cut it. And I always burn this in first. Don't touch that. Leave it sitting there so it doesn't fray. But I'll burn this one first. Give it a second. And then I'll immediately wrap it back up and put it on the thing. Out of the way, done, over with. Now this end, the end I just cut, and because I burnt and singed the end on that, this end over here is already burnt and singed. Why? Because that's what I did the last time I used it. But this end is raw. That's the end we're going to use to fit. Now this can be tricky for those out there who know, because you got to get like a little ball in the end. And it can be tricky sometimes to get it to be the right size. I can tell you right now, that is not going to be big enough. Maybe. Yeah, that don't feel like it's right. But I want it a little bit to cool it off, let it harden up on you. Get it in there and get it started. Yeah, that might be a little too big. But if you can hold it with these fingers and push it together, sometimes you can get it to go in there and it'll start working. But I think that one's going to be a little too big. It looks like it's got a little bump on the side right there. Like I said, this is tricky. Get this micro cord, the thread on one of these fids just right. Did that work? Yeah, I think that did it. Like I said, I always put it on there and make sure it's not going to come out on you. Okay. Now, this is what I do. Okay, now like I said at the very beginning, I said you don't want to weave these things so tight that you can't get your stitching or your fid, lacing needle up under there. You'll see why now. Because you want this thing loose. Like I said, anything that will help your productivity faster. Now, you don't want it so loose that it's not going to look good, but you don't want it so tight that you can't get the needle under there. There's a happy medium. But we're going to start on this side. Right? But we're going to flip it over, and I'm going to come down on this side. 3 or 4. I've been doing 4. Turn this thing sideways, and this is the way I do this. Here, let me zoom in just a little bit, and you can see this. It's something I've, the way I do it seems to be work for me. There might be a better way. But count 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to go in between that fourth and fifth one. Don't try to come in like this because you got to go in and you're going to be digging. Just take it and lay it right there in between there and kind of turn it sideways. Angle it up and down. You'll loosen it up a little bit and pull it back out. You usually get it loose and get it up in there. What you can do, when you notice, you probably can't see this on camera. It's not going to want to focus. But remember, there's 3 cords running in through this little loop that goes around. So you'll find the groove between those 2 cords you see. There's a groove in there. And you can get it to run right in that groove. In between the pieces you're going underneath and them core strands. If you can get it in that groove in between them core strands, you can usually slide it right up in there. You won't snag anything or anything. You won't have any issues. But you can kind of work it in there. And it'll go right up in there. And then, like I said, this is why you don't want to pull it so tight. I learned that the hard way. See? And it just popped out at the end. I know my camera's not focusing very well. Like I said, I don't have the best equipment. It's just not going to focus. There we go. Okay. Now, you got to manhandle this bracelet and bend it to your will. Remember, bend the paracord to your will. Now we're going to pull this all the way through. And yeah, it's loose and it's coming right through there. But it'll tighten itself back up once you start stitching. We're going to just pull all this through. Ooh, oh goodness, I didn't mean to do that. We're going to see how loose it is. I'll flatten it back out with my finger. And I'll pull it to right there at the end. Now I'll leave a good 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch sticking out. That way when I go to burn this, it'll form a big huge glob. And then I'm going to flatten it out. And I'll show people the way I do this. Many of us have one of these knotters tools, which I don't use to put vids in. That's a great advertising, marketing point, but it's really useless. But I'll take this off. That way all this right here, extra stuff, is not in my way. Because I'll use this knurled edge. Just like that. But anytime you're going to snip and singe and you're going to flatten it out, always have your tool. I've said this in my last video. Always have that tool sitting right there. We're going to back out a little bit. Always have it. Whatever you're going to flatten it with sitting right there so you can get a hold of it. And like me, since I've got this little piece of cord with a knot on the end, make sure it's not caught up in anything. So when you pick it up, it's not getting hung up on anything. But I'll take this thing and I'll kind of bend it so it's sticking up. So it's not wanting to lay flat. So it's sticking up. And then I'm going to now see that we want a glob. Now we got it up there. See, it's noticeable. But you want that big glob. That way when you melt it like that, it melds, melds whatever with the actual cord of the bracelet. And it's not going to come out. Now if I pulled it real hard, yeah, it might come out. But once it's just enough to keep it there. Right? Okay, now the stitching part. Get your cord up here. And we're going to come through. You're going to go through the back, but where we want to come out is above this piece, this black piece that's running this sideways. we're going to come out right here in this corner. Where this piece, this black piece, and this blue piece meet, right here in this little hole. That's where we want to come out at. Now, how do we do that? Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. Also, just like these pieces run, yeah, that's supposed to go up under there. I'll fix that later. Normally, I forgot when I finish, because this was the end of my cord. I usually run it back through so they're both sticking out on the same side. I can fix that later. Actually, I'll do it right here in just a second. But I'm going to run this up under the same piece where that blue accent cord is. See that? You see how it's getting caught up on the bottom of the bracelet? That's why I cut all these short. And we're going to just pull that through. Now it's going to suck up under this. They're going to disappear. Now we're going to take it and we're going to fit it through. You see what I'm saying? I wanted it to come out. We're going to just pull it through. We're going to twist this piece to get this little twist out right here. And it's going to disappear down in there. See, now you don't see it. Okay, now we're going to fix this part right here. Like I said, I normally run it up under there. But I'm worried about what I'm saying and talking to the camera as opposed to actually doing it. So, we'll use our hemostats again on this. And since that piece is not very tight, it shouldn't be very hard. We'll run our hemostats up under here. Get a hold of this piece. And just pull it through. Just like that. And now that they're both flat, once I go to snip and singe them, I'll bring them over this direction. It'll work. But there we go. There's that. That's the beginning. Now we're ready to stitch. So what we're going to do, most of you know how to do this, so you know that's the meat of making the bracelet right there. You know, I'll show you this stitching pattern, and once I get down to the end, you know, I'll show you how to do it or whatever. You can see my method, my technique. You might learn something or whatever from it. But I'll do a little bit, and then I'll come back when I get to the end, and I'll show you me finishing it. Okay, now, before I start stitching, all this stuff that 8-foot piece of micro cord could get caught on, we're going to get out of the way. I'll screw this back in here just so it's one piece and they don't get lost and separated. Set it over to the side. My expensive shears, oh yeah. We don't want them to drop on the floor and get banged up. So we definitely get them out of the way. I'm very careful of those. I got a little rack next to me with a bunch of magnets on it. Bam. Same thing with his hemostats. Get them. They'll stick over there. Now, I'll be honest with you, there's more stuff on my desk. It's very cluttered. But that right there, I've got enough room now here to work with. Okay, so what I say, we're going to go across, and we're going to go this first piece, not the one that wraps from the coming out of the core strand that goes in, but this next piece, we're going to go underneath it. from this direction and come out above it. The way I do this is just like I did on the back. I kind of hold this bracelet sideways. And I'll come at it like this. I'll pop it down in there if you can see this. Take it like that and just kind of push it down in there. Kind of turn it sideways and work it up and down. Kind of pull it, because there's slack in there. You can kind of wedge it up and down until you get the space and it'll come right through. Most of the time you won't snag anything. And I'll say this, for those who don't realize this, is something I've learned. If you do snag it and you've got your lacing needle going through and you've punctured your cord ever so slightly and you got a little bit wrapping around that fit, when you go to pull this, a lot of times you can feel it. You can feel it. It just has a... You get enough experience, you'll realize, you'll say, oh, I have pierced the cord. And that could be a bad thing because you can pull it and you'll get a run in it. So fix it right then and there. How do you fix it? Normally, you get you a razor blade and you kind of bend that cord up and you find it and you just cut that little tiny piece. That way when you go like pull it, it's not going to pull that fiber out of your thick cord and cause it run. But we got it in there. Pull. And I keep that in my hand. I keep that needle in my hand. And we don't have to put it down and pick it back up. But we see how I did that. Goes from the top of this side to the underneath on this side. And now we're going to drop down 2 and go underneath it. And it's going to go over the top right here. This piece will go over the piece. And we're going to go in, like I said, we're going to drop down 2. Because we're coming out on the top of this one. But we're going to go through on the bottom of this piece. So we're going to go through in this crack. Like again, like I say, I'll take it like this. I'll put it right there and I'll just kind of push it and it pops down in there. And you get good at it. You kind of wedge that piece up. Usually you get it to go right in there at an angle. Keeping the fit in your hand and pulling it. You got twists in it, get the twist out as you pull it through. And what I always do is pull this cord up and come around with it like that. And that kind of tightens it up. And I'll turn it sideways again. And I'll take that cord, kind of toss it over there. Come over this way. And now we're going to just drop down to the next spot. We'll pop it in there, kind of work it, and it comes right out. And that's why I say you don't tighten it up real tight. Because honestly, all this little bit of weaving or stitching down through there, it's going to draw it in. It's going to tighten it up just a little bit. Now, when you do this, you got the end, you got the piece coming off here, all your slacks over here, and then this is the end attached to the needle. Make sure everything's on the same side. So when you pull this through, the big loop doesn't get snagged up on the end of your bracelet and all that. We'll just pull it through. Before you get it to the end, twist it. Make sure it lines up. And do this side the same way as you did the other. Pull it and round it around like that. You can kind of hold that one down with your thumb. Get it on this side of the cord so don't get tangled. And do it again. We'll put it between, all we're going to do, we're dropping down. Now you just drop down one piece to right there. Just pop it down in there. Now turn it sideways and work it a little bit. And it'll come right through. And again, make sure you have all your cords over here on this side so they don't get caught around the bottom. I mean, it'll happen, but we're trying to keep that from happening. Now, we'll pull it. Get down to the end. Make sure there ain't no twists in it. And again, we pull it, we round it up, and come back on itself. And that gets much of the slack out. Now, I'll tell you, we can see the pattern starting to form. And we see how the two blue cords that are gutted, that are flat, they have drawn themselves together, and they fill up that entire space. And that's all there is to it, just back and forth, back and forth. Every time you do it, on this side, you drop down and you go up. When you come across this way, you go to the next one and you go up, and you come back, and you just, it's like a figure eight, if you will, back and forth, and you work your way all the way down. And as you go, just make sure that these two blue strands are being drawn together and flat. That's all there is to it. And I'll say, once you get to the actual end, or as you get down, you can do it in sections, or you can wait till you get to the end. I like to do about a third of the bracelet. I'll stitch it about a third of the way down, and I'll stop. And I'll come back with these pliers. And I'll pull the slack out. Because it's going to have a little bit of slack. You're going to pull it, and then you're going to get it from the other side and pull it. And what this is actually doing is first off, it's tightening up the stitching so you don't have any pieces that are flippy floppy. But more importantly, what it's doing is, if you're careful, and this comes with experience, but what you can do is, if any of these pieces on the edge, like I was saying, consistency with the tension, and you want all these little edges to boop, you don't want it boop, 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 all bumpy like down through. You want it smooth. When you tighten up this stitching piece, you can correct some of those bad spots. But also, you have to make sure that as you're pulling this and tightening it up, that you're not making it bumpy and uneven. You see what I'm saying? You have to be careful. And I find myself, this is one of my habits. I'll start off at the top and I'll start pulling it. But as you go down, you get more and more slack. So this piece that you're pulling, you're having to pull more and more. And then you got to pull more and more. What happens is, you're having to, as the slack increases and you're having to pull it more, have a tendency to pull it too tight, and it will, you can see the sides of the bracelet kind of want to dip in. And I have to stop and, no, don't pull it so tight. And you can work it as you're doing it. But as you're doing this, when you come back with that pair of pliers and you pull that stitching to get it nice and neat and tight and everything, you can use that as a way of evening up these edges so that they'll lay straight, and correct any of these spots where that one bump might be sticking out further than the rest of them. And you try to correct that way. It's straight that is. Now, obviously, at the top, it's going to be curved a little bit. Same thing at the bottom. But for most part, right down through the main part of it, like if you look, you can see you kind of get that piece right there sticks out a little bit more than it should. It's not that noticeable, but it's noticeable to me. Now, this side looks pretty good. Maybe this one right here sticks out a little bit. But see, that's what you can come back when you're doing this part of the bracelet. You can correct some of that. like I said, I turn mine sideways, make sure we got all the cord on this side of that bottom buckle. We just lay it in there and that next groove down, pop it in there, and kind of turn it sideways while I'm up and down prying the slack, and it'll come right through. So now that my pliers are, you see how it's going to catch. Get them out of the way. Get all that stuff out of the way so this 8 feet of itty bitty cord don't get snagged and caught on anything. Like I said, pull it up and round it off. Get it on this side of the bracelet where I'm coming from. Pop it in. Okay, I snagged it. So you pull back. Try not to catch that snag. And we pull it through. Pull it through, pull it through, pull it through, pull it through. And again, we do the same thing. We pull it and we round it around. Round it around. Turn it sideways. Get it on this side. Do the same thing. Like I said, we make sure these little blue ones are lining up. And we pull it down. And again, we do it again. Now, I've gotten pretty good at this. I've snagged something under there. I'm trying not to. There we go. Okay, pull it up, round it around. And that's it. That's all there is to this. Pop it in, pry it, work it up, pull it up. And usually, if you're paying attention when you go to pull it through, you can tell this thing's going to have, this loop you're drawing up in there is going to have a twist in it. If it is, you just slow down right before you get to the end. You kind of twist this with your fingers, and it'll line up. Pull it up, round it around. It's the way I do it. Might be a better way, might be a faster way, might be a more efficient way. But this is the way I found to do it. Like I say, I always try to keep stuff on this side, so that way you don't get anything tangled on this. Like I say, these, that's why I cut them short. Because sometimes it gets wrapped around there. Because I don't normally do it on top of my desk. I'm leaning over doing this stuff in my lap. And I have a tendency for it to get wrapped around. Because I get to moving pretty fast. Bam, bam, come back. That's all there is to it. Just That's it. But we see what I was saying? How the two blue pieces, the accent pieces, are being drawn together into that spot. It's pulling it together. And it's not real wide. See, down here you got all this space. But up here, it's drawn together. It fits in there nicely. And, like I said, you have a contrast between the color of the bracelet and the blue theme. And then within the blue theme, you have a contrast between the accent color in the back and the threading. And I have found that the darker, like I got two blues. I mean, you can use any color you want, but the darker color, like if you use two shades of blue, the darker in the back and the brighter on the front. Or you can do it the other way around. Either way looks good. But let's look at something and I'll show you. We lay this down here. See how this bracelet is kind of, looks like it's curved a little bit? And you see how right here it's narrower than it is down here. It's because I've tightened it up just a little bit. But when I get finished, I'll show you something. But I'll go ahead and finish the rest of this out, and I'll come back and I'll show you, you know, the ending process of it. But for the most part, most of you can figure that out. There you go. Okay, folks, I've got it stitched. Now, I haven't tightened it up. I just want to throw this out there. Here's a little tip trick I mentioned earlier, and I'll kind of expand on it. If you look from about where my finger is up to this point, you notice that the accent color in the middle, it's even on both sides. It's like the blue section is the same width. Same too with the outer part of this bracelet. You don't see, it's not all boop, 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 bumpy down through there. It's pretty much straight. Okay, and you notice my buckle is laying straight. My buckle is not cocked off to the side. Just throwing it out there. It makes for a whole better picture and presentation than taking a picture of that. Builds confidence in the customer. And it also is what's the word I'm looking for? Professionalism, I guess. But where I'm ultimately going with this is, you see how it's all even to about right in this area. And you see how it looks like this blue section down here is wider than it is up here. And you see how it's still kind of like right here on this outer edge of the bracelet. It looks like it's kind of hard to see, but it kind of bows out and goes back in right here. So there's like a piece right there. I can feel it with my finger. That piece right there is sticking out further. It's boop, 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 boop. It's bumpy. It's because I haven't done anything from here down. I've just got the stitching. We come back with that pair of pliers, like I said. And we just this is the attention to detail. This, yes, it takes a little bit of time, but this is what goes, this is what takes you to the next level. It's the small attention, patience and attention to detail in your work. This is what healthy pride. We'll say healthy pride. I don't want anybody to think I'm boasting, tooting my own horn. It's just a healthy pride, taking pride in what you do. Whatever you do, do it as if for the Most High and not man. But see, as I pull this piece, it tightens this outer piece up. And you can look at it as you do, and you kind of keep it straight. If there's one of them that's sticking out a little bit further than the other, you can pull it, and it'll suck it in just a little bit. You can make some last minute corrections with it. Now, I'll go and tell you, by no means is this thing perfectly straight. It's not like I took a laser down through there. If you look at it, you can see, I can see it. There's a couple of little spots that, and as you do this, like I said earlier, when you pull it, it's a little piece right here. See how it's got slack in it. As I pull it and work it all the way down, that little amount of slack will get more and more and more. And as it gets more and more and more, I have a tendency to grab a hold of it and just pull it and pull it and pull it. And what happens is it causes you, the bracelet itself, it sucks in because I put too much tension on that thing. It makes the outer edge of this bracelet get narrow where I do that. So that's something, one of my, so I have to be mindful of that. When this slack starts getting a lot, and I'll do a couple of sections of it. And I'll go back and I'll turn around and I'll look at it and see if it's even, trying to get this sides as even. And also, like I say, the width of the blue section in the middle, trying to get it even. Because I know you can see it. It's wider down here than it is up here. Now, granted, down here at the bottom where you got all these cords going through, it's going to be a little bit wider right there at the bottom. But we don't want it to be gradually getting wider. We want it, you know what I'm saying, the same width, as far down as we can get it. Now, right there at the end, it's not going to be perfect. But we're trying to, the whole thing, this stitching, as I go through and tighten up this stitching, this takes your work to a whole new level. But this is where you can make a lot of the corrections in this very last, well, not the last, but one of the last steps. We pull that. I'll say this too. When you get a hold of this piece and you pull it, yeah, obviously you're going to pull it up to get the slack out so you can get up underneath it. But when you pull it, don't pull it up. Pull it toward that way, because that's the way you want it to go. And you want it right there where it's coming out of the black pieces. It's already flat where you want it to be. Same thing with this one. You do it the same way. You pull it, but then you kind of I don't know if you can tell, but you notice that little piece of slack, it's getting a little bit longer. Now, if I had started all the way at the top and done it all the way down, by the time I get down here, that piece of slack will be sticking out an inch or two. And that's when I have the issue with pulling it, just getting in a rush and yanking it and it sucking in them ends, the edges of the bracelet. But yeah, we just pull this. Okay, now let me shut up and I'll get done with this and I'll show you how I finish this thing off. But I figured I'd show how I do this. Like I said, do a couple little sections and come back and look at it. You can take your fingers and kind of work it. Like that, and then everything kind of falls into place. I know you can't see this, but I'm taking it and I'm looking down at it like this. See how right there? It's just the way that stitching's coming out. That's what that is, though. That one little piece. Alright. And you see how that piece is slack. Now watch, I'll show you this. You grab a hold of it right here and you just kind of pull it up enough that you can come at this angle and you can get up under it. And you get as close to that black as you can, and when you pull it, you see I still got slack out. And I can kind of pull it. And I still need to pull it a little bit more. Now, that means I got to readjust my pliers. So if you do, instead of doing it all at once, because when that piece of slack gets long, you have to readjust your pliers. If you do it in sections, you don't have to readjust your pliers every single time you pull this. And it just makes for you can do it. See how I had to readjust my pliers on it? Grab it once and pull it, and then I got to go back and grab it again and pull it. It's because I'm doing too much at once. And that just slows you down. It means it takes you longer to do your bracelet. If you're trying to make these things fast, every little tip comes into play. Okay, we're getting down to the end. Now let's check it. Let's see what that looks like. See how it's still a little wide right here, but it's not as wide as it was. It looks like it's the width of that blue section is pretty much consistent all the way down here. Like I said, down here at the end, it's going to be a little bit wider. So what we're going to do is we're going to back up just a little bit. And we're going to see how I'm having to readjust my pliers. Don't want to do that. Every time you touch that cord, there's potential you're going to snag it. We don't want to do that. Okay. Now let's look at it. Yeah, it looks a little bit better now. I usually take my fingers, I run it down there, and I'll kind of smooth it out too. Look at it. Looks pretty good. And it's not perfect. Like I said, I ain't putting no laser down the side of it or anything. I'm just dead-eyed Daryl. Looks pretty good though. Okay, now this is the last section. We're going to pull that one tight. Pull it up, and we're going to come across. Okay, now, for the very last thing, what we're going to do is we're going to run it through. It's going to be our last cross over, and it's going to run down through where this piece of electric blue is. right over here in this section. That way it's going to come out. But they're all kind of in the same area. But we're going to run it through. Right there. Bam. Now we're going to pull it through. Okay. Now, right here on this end, I'll say this. Even though it's the last section, don't take that needle off yet. You may need to do something with it. Don't take it off until you're completely done. If you know for sure that you're not going to use it, just leave it on there. That's something else I learned. You do it and you think, oh, I'm done. And then, okay, now this last piece right here, which is connected to these black pieces of the bracelet, I always want to tighten them up one last time. And these blues are pretty good to go. And that one. And we're going to make sure everything looks good. Yeah, that didn't come out where I wanted it to. You see how these two blues at the end, they're running from this side across. They look like they're going into the same hole. Yeah, I don't like that. It messes up the pattern. So we're going to see if I can't. May not be it. Yeah, see? See, I put a little space in between them right there. See how these two blue pieces, the accent color, there's a gap in there. That's just the nature of this bracelet. Right there at the end, they separate and go on either side of those two core strands. So, you know, there's not really much you can do. You can, but it's just not gonna do. They're not gonna want to stay. They're naturally gonna want to separate and have that gap there. See, there's still a gap. Now you can do the best. You can work it, but it's going to eventually separate anyway. Okay, now we're done. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to do this section up here first, because it's the easiest one. We're going to take these, because like I said before, you've got them hanging off the edge. You don't want to snip and singe them on this edge. You want to try to hide them the best way you can on the back. So what you do is you take this one and you just kind of pull it off of here to the side like that. Hold that black piece down and then do the other one the same way. Pull it. That way they're kind of toward the inside of the bracelet. Okay, now get our lighter ready. Whatever you use to flatten it out with, get it ready. Like I said, I always take that off. Lay it down. Have it sitting there ready for you to pick up. Make sure it's not going to snag on anything. Those old two little pieces, they ain't going to be good for nothing. All best efforts. Try not to burn anything but what you want. And, you know, you always want to be mindful. This is going to sit close to the skin. So you don't want any little burrs. You want to keep them anywhere, anytime you melt and burn that cord, you want it to be smooth. Snip and singe, especially what's going to be on your arm, or when you start and you cut your pieces and then you're going to be weaving, you want the ends of them to be smooth. That way nothing gets snagged. Your skin or the cord. Okay. That would have been better if it would have been more toward the middle, but that's okay. It's okay. We learn from our mistakes. It should have been drawn in toward the middle just a little bit, but that's okay. Now, we're done with this. We're going to take our fid off. Put it back in a handy dandy carrying case. I actually had just ordered me some more of these Type 1 550 fids, because I've got 6 of them. Every now and then I do one of them big advanced bracelets. I did one the other day that had 8 strands. And I got 2 other big fids in here, but I don't like using them. One's really, it's a bigger, fatter diameter, and it's longer. Or no, I take that back. It's the same diameter as those, it's just longer. And then this one, it's the same length, but it's a big old fat diameter one. It's just 2 oblong. I'd rather them all be the same. So I ordered me some more. Like I said, they're not that expensive. I can find them on Amazon. Okay, now, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, once again, make sure all this is how we want the end of it to look. We'll flip it over, and I'm going to cut this because I've got these high-dollar shears. I can cut through all them cords with one fell swoop. I'm like the samurai warrior of paracordologist. Hey, and I thank my wife for this. She's the one that gave me these. I told her, I said, I got to get me a good pair of scissors. And she said, I know you'll take care of them, but you can use them. She said, I reserve the right to take them back at any moment. I said, okay. And I priced them just to see how much they were. Yeah, they're, yeah. But you get all these up and you try to get them in one bundle. And I'm going to say this. You got this many of them right there at once. We're going to cut them, and we're not going to move. Because if you move them, they might get sucked back down and might get, you want them to stay just like they are. And you're going to cut them. You have your flattening tool, your lighter right there. And we're going to cut all these. And we're going to move all the excess out of the way. And we're going to burn, snip and singe this immediately. That way we don't move it and everything shift around. So we're going to reach down here. And take this single blue and kind of, there we go. Get it up in the middle. That way you know it's going to, when you melt them together, it's going to get in there in that bunch. Bam. That's what sharp scissors will do. You're not sawing at it. Okay, now, I may have cut that a little close, but that's okay. We're going to get this. I'm going to turn my flame down just a little bit. Okay, we're ready. So we're trying to do just the ends of the cord and nothing else. Now, granted, it happens. We all know. Now we're going to take it. Yeah, I got on that piece just a little bit. This piece right here on the side just a little bit, but it's okay. And this one got a little, but it's not bad. It's on the back side. We always remember it's on the back side. But we also, even though it's not going to be seen, we still want this to look as good as we can. Why? Because people would look at that. People who buy these things, they look at that stuff. They look at how you've set this up. That's why I say I want to come up with a better method. This is not the prettiest method, but it makes it easier, and it produces a nice wide bracelet. But there we go. That's it. That looks pretty good if you ask me. But like I say, I'll come back to this. I'm going to lay it out here like this. Get our buckle straight. I want to get our bracelet straight, kind of run our fingers down it. Like I said, we don't want to take a picture of it. present our work like that. It doesn't look good. We want to straighten this thing out. Best we can. Make sure our buckles are in line with the bracelet. Like presentation. It's like I learned in the restaurant business. His job is 95% presentation, 1% effort. Meaning, if it doesn't look good, nobody's going to eat it. If it doesn't look good, nobody's going to buy it. Now, granted, I'm not the best at this. Granted, I'm not a YouTube creator. I'm a paracordologist. And, you know, there are people out there, we won't mention any names, that have helped me and given me pointers in this. See, now it looks straight down the edges. The buckle's in line. The buckle's not cocked sideways. The bracelet is not looking like a drunk snake. It looks presentable. But there we go. Just like when you go to take a picture, you want to get that thing up there. I'll get it straight. You don't want it all wabi-sabi. You want it straight. But there we go. Let's take a final look at that. We'll get it to focus in. But you see how the two accent cords have been pulled together in that space in the middle. Because of the stitching, it's pulled it together. Now it just looks like one solid piece down through there. And you can kind of see right there it's two separate pieces. But for the most part, it looks like it's one solid piece. Now, I guess, you know, you could buy, I've got a lot of 550 on hand. I don't have any of the, what do they call it? So the bigger, thicker cord, shock cord or apocalyptic cord or 750, you know, some of the thicker cords. I don't have any of that. I don't work with any of it, you know, on a regular basis. Mostly I have 550, top 3 and top 1. I've got some 275. What is that? Is that 1 or top 2? I don't know. I got some 275 I work with, and a lot of micro cord. I do a lot of stitching. Mostly this. This is kind of, you know, this is one of the most popular bracelets I sell right here. This style. This kind of become my not the 8-strand cord, just the crisscross stitched trilobite with an accent color. But there we go. I know it's a long video, but hopefully you learned something. Like I said, no offense to any of the other YouTubers and creators out there, but there's a lot of things that could be taught. Now, granted, there's a lot of things that no matter what I tell you, you're going to have to tactile feedback. You're going to have to do it to learn. But you'll never know what to be feeling for unless someone tells you. And that's a lot of the information that you don't get. People don't teach in the YouTube videos. They show you over and under, and there you go. Well, that's great. What's the add to? What are the little tips and tricks that you've learned through doing this? But there you go. That's a big old bracelet, man. Bam. That's like a bangle for a woman. But anyway, there we go. Well, I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. I would say like, give it a like at least. I ain't gonna say subscribe because I don't know though. I've had people say you ought to make these videos. I don't know. It takes a lot of time to make videos. I'd rather spend more time on. I'm a paracordologist, not a YouTube creator. But with that, I'll sign off. And remember, clean, neat, and tight. Clean, neat, and tight. And happy weaving.